Earth does not betray its promise. We will not deliver the helpless to wolves. If you come for them, you come for us." Her words spread like a firestorm. On every human world, people rose in unity. Soldiers prepared, fleets mobilized, and civilians sent messages of support to the Vayari camps. "We will not cast you out," they said. "Not now. Not ever." The Vayari listened with tears streaming down their faces. For the first time in generations, they were not alone against the galaxy. The stars themselves had rejected them. But Earth, fierce, stubborn Earth, had chosen them. And that choice changed everything. The day of decision arrived like thunder. The coalition fleet appeared at the edge of Sol, their ships dark and countless, blotting out the light of distant stars. The galaxy had united, if only for one cause, to crush the small, stubborn world that had dared to shelter the unwanted. In the refugee camps, the Vayari huddled together. Mothers held their children. Fathers stood with clenched fists. Elders whispered prayers into the cold night air. They knew this battle was not only for Earth, but for their very right to exist. The humans prepared as they always had, not with grand speeches, but with quiet determination. On Earth's surface, cities dimmed their lights to conserve energy for defense grids. In orbit, fleets took position, their crews standing ready. Ships built not for conquest, but for survival, now bristled with weapons, shields glowing faintly against the void. Captain Reyes stood on the bridge of her flagship, her gaze locked on the incoming enemy. "They think mercy makes us weak," she said softly. "Let us show them what mercy defends." Her crew answered with a steady chorus. "Aye, Captain." When the first shots rang out, the void lit with fire. Beams of energy cut through the dark. Missiles streaked across the stars, and the silence of space shattered into chaos. The coalition fought with overwhelming numbers, their ships pressing forward like a tide meant to drown Earth. But the humans fought with something the others could not understand. They fought not only for survival, but for a promise. Each Vayari life sheltered on Earth was another reason for them to hold the line. Each memory of humanity's own history of the times they had been cast aside was another reason not to surrender. The battle stretched into hours, then days. Fleets clashed again and again, neither side giving in. Human ships burned, but still they fought. The coalition pressed harder, but Earth's defense refused to collapse. From the surface, the Vayari watched the sky glow with streaks of fire. They could not fight beside their protectors, but they could pray and they could hope. Lero stood among them, his small hands gripping his father's arm. "Will they win?" he whispered. His father's eyes were wet, but his voice was firm. "They are fighting for us. That makes them stronger than any enemy." At last, the turning point came. Reyes ordered a desperate maneuver, one that risked her fleet's survival. Human ships split apart, luring the coalition deeper, drawing them into Earth's gravity well where defenses waited. When the trap snapped shut, the stars themselves seemed to explode with light. Coalition vessels fell one after another. Confusion spread through their lines. They had expected an easy victory, not a stubborn, unyielding stand. And then, like a wave breaking, the coalition began to retreat. The sky grew quiet again, the stars no longer burning with war. The humans had not been destroyed. They had endured. On the ground, the Vayari wept openly. Parents embraced their children, elders fell to their knees, and voices rose in gratitude. For the first time in memory, they felt the chains of exile breaking. Earth had kept its promise. The galaxy had tried to force humanity to cast them out. Instead, Earth had stood taller, stronger, and proved to all that mercy was not weakness. In that moment, the Vayari knew they were no longer homeless. They were no longer cast out. They had been given shelter. They had been given a future, and they would never forget it. The signal floated through the blackness of space, carrying with it the weight of a broken people. The Vayari did not know if anyone on Earth would even hear it. Many thought it would be ignored, as so many pleas before it had been. On the refugee ships, families gathered close, waiting in silence. No one spoke of hope aloud, but all felt it trembling deep in their chests. Then, after endless days, the reply came. It was not a warning. It was not a refusal. It was a simple human voice carried across the stars. "You are welcome," it said. "Come to us." At first, no one believed it. They thought it must be a trick or some cruel game. The galaxy had grown skilled at turning them away. Some even feared that Earth might lure them close only to destroy them. removing the problem of the wandering Vayari once and for all. But the humans repeated their message again and again, each time with the same words, the same calm tone. You are welcome. Come to us. On the ship, Lyra's Grace. Elder Saral fell to his knees when he heard the words. His hands shook, his voice broke, and for the first time in years, tears ran down his face, not of sorrow but of release. Around him, others wept openly. Even the children, who did not fully understand, began to cry because the grown ones were crying. The news spread through the fleet like fire. For the first time in generations, there was not silence or despair in the halls of their ships, but voices lifted in something almost forgotten: hope. And so, with engines rattling and hulls creaking, the Vayari turned their course toward the blue planet called Earth. The approach was filled with fear. The Vayari were too used to betrayal. As the pale sphere of Earth grew larger in their viewports, many whispered prayers. Others clutched their children close, ready for disaster. Would human weapons fire upon them before they could descend? Would the promise of welcome vanish at the last moment? But what they saw instead was light. Dozens of human ships rose from the planet's surface, but not in formation of war. They came shining like lanterns surrounding the broken Vayari fleet. Instead of opening fire, they moved alongside the battered vessels, guiding them gently, as if carrying wounded travelers home. Through the comms came more voices, human engineers offering to stabilize engines, human medics asking about the sick and the weak. The Vayari could hardly understand. No empire had ever treated them with such kindness. One small girl named Raya pressed her face against a viewport, watching as a Terran craft docked with her family's failing ship. She whispered to her mother, "They came to help us." Her mother could not answer. She was too overcome with tears. When the first of the Vayari ships entered Earth's atmosphere, alarms sounded through their decks, not because of danger, but because their systems had never felt air so rich, so full of life. The planet below was not silent. It was alive, green and blue, filled with sound and storm. Landing was rough. Many of the ships were too old, too fragile. But human pilots and machines steadied them. Instead of crashing, the Vayari ships touched down gently upon fields and plains prepared for them. The doors of the first ship opened, and the Vayari stepped onto solid ground for the first time in their lives. The air was heavy but clean. The soil was rough but real. Above them stretched a sky that was not metal, not recycled light, but endless and true. Some fell to the earth and kissed it. Others simply stood still, unable to breathe from the weight of the moment. Waiting for them were humans, not with weapons raised, but with open hands. Doctors in white coats, translators with kind smiles, farmers and builders all ready to help. They carried water, food, blankets, and medicine. One human doctor knelt before an elderly Vayari woman who could barely walk. With steady hands, he lifted her onto a stretcher. She looked at him confused and whispered in her own language, "Why are you helping me?" The translator beside him answered softly, "Because you asked." The days that followed were filled with disbelief. The Vayari expected the kindness to end at any moment. They thought perhaps the humans would demand something in return, or that their hospitality would sour into cruelty. But no demands came. No threats, no conditions. Only care. Earth repaired what it could. Human engineers worked on broken Vayari ships, patching hulls and restarting engines that had been silent for years. Human children brought flowers and toys to the alien camps, offering them with shy smiles. The Vayari children, shy at first, slowly began to smile back. For the first time in centuries, laughter was heard among the Vayari. One night, Elder Saral stood before the survivors of his people. Torches and human lights burned around them, casting warmth against the cold of night. He looked at the faces, so many tired, so many scarred, and yet in every eye there was light again. "We asked the stars for mercy," he said, voice breaking. "The stars turned us away. But here on this world of storms we have found mercy. Remember this moment. Remember who opened their arms to us." The crowd was silent, not because they did not believe, but because their hearts were too full. Above them, the night sky stretched wide and clear. For the first time in their wandering lives, the Vayari looked at the stars not as exiles, but as guests who had finally found a place where someone had said, "You are welcome." The days turned into weeks and the Vayari began to see what humanity was. The galaxy had painted Earth as savage, but what they saw was different. Humans were fierce, yes, but not cruel. Their strength did not come from hunger for conquest, but from a refusal to let hardship break them. They had learned compassion in the hardest of places. The Vayari children learned to run barefoot across the grass, laughing beside human friends. Their mothers learned to cook meals with food grown in soil instead of metal trays. Their fathers learned to build roofs with human tools, roofs that did not leak or crack. The galaxy's threats still loomed like storm clouds. But beneath those clouds, the Vayari felt sunlight for the first time in centuries. One evening, as the stars burned above, a gathering was held in the great field, where the largest Vayari ship lay grounded. Torches flickered, casting warm light on both Vayari and human faces. Elder Saral stood before them all, his voice carried by translators into 2 languages. "Once we believed the stars had cast us out forever," he said. "Every door was closed. Every friend had turned away. We thought our story was ended. But then we came here, to this world of storms and fire, to these people the galaxy calls dangerous, and instead of rejection they gave us shelter. Instead of fear they gave us welcome." He paused, looking at the faces before him, human and Vayari alike, side by side in the firelight. His eyes filled with tears. "Perhaps the galaxy is right to fear the humans," he said softly, "for they fear what they do not understand. And what they do not understand is this: mercy is stronger than cruelty. Kindness is stronger than rejection. And these humans, they are stronger than all the stars that turned us away." The crowd was silent, moved beyond words. In the stillness, children's laughter drifted on the air, pure and unbroken. The galaxy might rage, but for the first time in generations, the Vayari were not afraid of tomorrow. For the first time, they were beginning to believe they had found more than shelter. They had found a home. The weeks of quiet did not last. The galaxy was not blind, and its anger only grew louder. One by one, fleets gathered at their borders. Messages poured in like storms filled with warnings and threats. "The Vayari are cursed," came the voice of the Keth Dominion. "Cast them out, or you will share their doom." "They will drain you," said the Iral councils. "They will poison your future." "Send them back to the void," demanded the Soren traders. "Or we will close our markets forever." Human leaders listened to every word. They did not answer with panic or apology. Their reply was always the same: "They came to us in need. They are safe here. That will not change." The Vayari heard these exchanges and trembled. They had lived too long with rejection not to fear what would come next. For generations they had been the hunted, the unwanted. To them, the galaxy was a wall of enemies. Now they feared that Earth too would become a target. In the refugee fields, parents whispered their worries at night. What if the empires bring war? What if the humans regret us? What if they send us away to save themselves? The children, who had just begun to smile again, felt the heaviness return. Lero, the young boy, asked his father, "Will we have to run again?" The father looked into the boy's eyes and thought of all the years spent drifting, hiding, starving. He wanted to promise safety, but he could not. Instead, he whispered, "We will see, my son. We will see." Humanity, however, showed no fear. Captain Reyes, the woman who had welcomed the first Vayari ship, walked through the camps daily. She saw their worry, their doubt, their haunted eyes. She stopped to speak to them, her voice steady, her gaze strong. "We are not afraid of threats," she told them. "Earth has always lived under storms. We have always survived. Do you think a few angry voices among the stars will frighten us?" Her words spread through the Vayari like a fire. Some found courage in them, others disbelief, but all felt the strength behind them. As the galaxy's pressure grew, so too did small acts of cruelty. Merchant ships that once traded with Earth began refusing routes. Distant stations sent back human envoys with closed doors. A shadow of isolation began to form, yet Earth did not bend. Instead, they built faster. Human workers joined with Vayari hands, raising new shelters, planting new crops, repairing broken hulls. Where the galaxy tried to cut them off, humanity answered with resilience. The Vayari watched in wonder. They had always believed humans were dangerous, wild and reckless children of a violent world. But what they saw now was different. These humans were not dangerous because of cruelty. They were dangerous because they refused to give up. One evening, Elder Saral sat beside a fire in the settlement. Around him, Vayari families ate food grown from Earth's soil. Children laughed nearby, chasing one another in circles. He lifted his gaze to the human families sitting with them, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. He spoke softly to those gathered. We feared the humans would be cruel, but the truth is stranger. They are kind without reason. They give without demand. And that, my people, is a power greater than all the fleets that rejected us. The listeners bowed their heads. Some wept silently because they knew his words were true, but fear was not gone. One night, the skies above Earth lit with sudden fire. Dozens of strange signals appeared on human scanners, fleets from neighboring empires watching from the edges of the system. They did not cross into Earth's space, but their presence was heavy, a silent warning. We are watching. We are waiting. In the camps, panic rippled. Many Vayari fell to despair, convinced that war was inevitable. Some even begged the humans to send them away to save themselves. But when the news reached the human cities, the people of Earth did not waver. Instead, they lit beacons across their continents, massive lights that shone into the night sky. Their message was clear. We are not hiding. We are not afraid. The next day, Earth's leaders addressed both their people and the stars. Threaten us if you wish, they said. We will not cast out those who came to us for help. The Vayari are safe here. As long as Earth endures, they will have shelter. These words traveled far. Across the galaxy, they were called reckless, arrogant, even suicidal. But among the Vayari, they were remembered as sacred. That night, in the refugee camp, a little girl named Raya asked her mother, "Why do the humans protect us when no one else would?" Her mother knelt, holding her close. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice was steady. Because the humans are different. Because they know what it means to suffer. And because, child, they have chosen us. Raya looked up at the sky where the stars burned cold and distant. For the first time, she did not see them as enemies. She saw them as faraway lights, and between those lights, a place of safety. Earth. The galaxy might circle like predators, but Earth stood like a shield. And behind that shield, the Vayari began to believe in something they had long forgotten. They began to believe in tomorrow. The pressure on Earth grew with every passing day. Fleets prowled the borders of human space, their shadows stretching long across the dark. Trade routes were threatened, alliances tested, and every council chamber in the galaxy rang with accusations. And yet, Earth did not bend. At the United Terran Assembly, leaders from across the planet stood shoulder to shoulder. Nations that had once quarreled over land and power now spoke with one voice. Their message was clear. We do not abandon those who seek our shelter. This decision shocked the galaxy. Many had believed that humanity, still considered young among the stars, would bow to pressure. But humans had carried the memory of their own history, the times when they too had been refugees, when borders had been closed to their suffering, when voices had turned them away. That memory burned deep, and it guided them now. For the Vayari, this stance was more than protection. It was a miracle. They gathered in small groups at night, staring at the sky as if expecting the stars themselves to change. Their elders spoke in hushed voices about what was happening. They risk themselves for us, one said. They choose us even when all others reject us. Lero listened carefully, his wide eyes shining in the dim light. For the first time, he did not imagine endless flight or hiding. He imagined a home that could last. But even as hope grew, so did fear. The galaxy's threats became sharper. Rumors whispered of a combined fleet, one strong enough to crush Earth if it refused to obey. The Vayari asked among themselves, will the humans fight for us? Can they even win? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. One cold night, alarms blared across human outposts. A coalition fleet had crossed into neutral space, its weapons armed, its intent undeniable. Messages of ultimatum were broadcast across every channel. Hand over the Vayari, the voices demanded. Do this, and you may keep your place among the stars. Refuse, and you will fall. Fear swept through the camps. Vayari families clung to each other, believing the end had come. Some whispered that they should surrender themselves, to save their protectors from destruction. But Earth's reply was swift, firm, and heard across every corner of the galaxy. Captain Rhea stood before the transmission arrays, her face unshaken. Her voice carried like iron through the void. You threaten us because we gave shelter. You call it weakness. You think mercy is a curse? But hear this. The Vayari once walked proudly among the stars. Their ships were like silver wings stretched across the void, and their voices carried songs that could move even the coldest of hearts. They were builders, dreamers, and explorers. Whole generations were raised on ships that never touched a planet's surface. Yet the children laughed and played as if the stars themselves were their playground. They believed their place in the galaxy was eternal. But pride is a dangerous thing. In time, the Veari began to close themselves off from others. They made rivals instead of friends, competitors instead of allies. When they were strong, they thought they needed no one. When their fleets were large, they ignored the pleas of smaller species. And so, when hardship finally came to them, the galaxy remembered. It began quietly, first with failing harvests on their worlds. Crops withered, water grew scarce, and hunger spread through once bright cities. The Veari, desperate, reached out to their neighbors. They sent envoys, humble and bowed, asking for aid. But doors that had once been open were shut in their faces. "You turned away from us when we needed you," some empires said. "You are proud, and you brought this on yourselves," others replied. One by one, the answers came back. Cold, final, merciless. No one would help them. Soon, the famine became a flood. Entire colonies starved. Ships filled with refugees left their broken worlds, searching for a port that would welcome them. But space is wide and the galaxy is not gentle. At border after border, the same warning was given. You cannot stay here. Move on. The Veari became wanderers not by choice but by exile. Their mighty fleets turned into floating tombs. Engines that once carried them proudly now dragged slowly, strained by time and overuse. Families huddled in the dark of failing ships, whispering songs of the past to their children while hiding the truth that no one wanted them anymore. The children grew up staring at starfields with no promise behind them. To them, the stars were not a home. The stars were a reminder that they had been cast out. As decades passed, their situation worsened. Supplies dwindled. Hulls cracked. Once bright cities inside their generation ships grew dim. Dust gathered where laughter once lived. Their people began to believe they were cursed, abandoned not just by the galaxy but by the stars themselves. There were stories told to keep hope alive, stories of how the Veari once built wonders, stories of how perhaps one day some hidden world would open its arms to them. But those were only stories, and hunger does not wait for hope. And so despair became their constant companion. One evening aboard the ship, Lyra's Grace, an elder named Siral stood before a group of children. They were thin, their eyes hollow with quiet hunger. He wanted to tell them of gardens, of rivers, of bright skies they had never seen. Instead, his voice trembled as he said, "We belong to the stars, children. But the stars no longer belong to us." A silence followed his words, heavy and unbearable. The children did not cry. They had grown too used to sorrow. Fleet after fleet continued their journey. They searched, they begged, they prayed. But wherever they went, the same answer followed: rejection. Even those who had once traded with them, those who had once called them friends, turned them away. The Veari were not merely exiles. They had become ghosts of the void. And yet somewhere in the deepest corner of their hearts a spark still flickered. It was faint, fragile, but alive, because even when everything was taken from them, the Veari still dreamed of finding one place, just one, where they could stop running. One world where children could play without fear, one sky they could call their own. That dream kept them alive. Even when reason told them it was foolish, the spark grew weaker with each passing year, but it never died completely. Then came the day their navigator spoke of a world they had avoided for generations. It was not rich. It was not safe. In fact, it was infamous. The galaxy called it a death world, a place of storms, violent creatures, and unpredictable seas. Its name was Earth. The Veari elders hesitated. Stories of Earth were not of kindness or mercy. They were of danger, of reckless beings who rose from a hostile world and survived against all odds. Humans, they were called. Too young to be wise, too fierce to be trusted, and yet, when the Veari looked upon their own dying ships, when they listened to the coughs of the sick and the cries of hungry children, they knew they had no choice left. The stars had cast them out. The galaxy had turned away. Only the death world remained. So with trembling hands the Veari sent a signal, not of arrogance, not of demand, just a simple message of truth. We are a people with no home. Our ships are broken. Our children are dying. We have been cast out by the stars. Will you let us land? The message left their transmitters and disappeared into the black void. Days passed. Then weeks. The Veari waited, breath held, hearts pounding. Perhaps this time, too, there would be silence. Perhaps the humans would answer with weapons. Perhaps Earth would reject them as all others had, but still they waited. Because hope, though battered and bruised, was the last treasure the Veari carried. News traveled faster than light. By the time the last Veari ship landed safely, the galaxy already knew what Earth had done. The reaction was immediate and filled with anger. Across star systems, empires held emergency councils. Admirals of powerful fleets shouted in warning. Politicians gave cold speeches. Old wounds and old grudges stirred once more. Earth has made a dangerous mistake, declared the Keth Dominion. The Veari are outcasts for a reason, said the Iral councils. If humans give them shelter, they will share in their curse, whispered the traders of the Soren Belt. Messages flooded Earth's channels, not of congratulations, but of threats. Some came politely. Do not do this. Send them away. Others were sharper, laced with menace. Reject them, or we will treat you as we treat them. But Earth did not answer with fear. Humanity stood firm. The human leaders spoke as one voice carried through the stars. Their words were simple, but they shook the galaxy. They asked for shelter, we gave it. We do not abandon those who come to us in need. The Veari heard these words, and many of them trembled. For years they had been turned away, rejected again and again. They had come to believe the galaxy was united in its hatred of them. Now they feared that humanity too would pay a price for opening its arms. On the grassy fields where their ships lay grounded, the Veari gathered at night. Elders whispered of the danger. Parents held their children tightly, wondering if the kindness of humans would bring war to their fragile new home. One young Veari, a boy named Lero, asked his father, "Will the humans send us away if the others threaten them?" His father had no answer. He had lived too long with disappointment to speak easily of hope. Yet when he saw the humans building shelter side by side with Veari hands, when he saw Terran children laughing as they shared games with his people, he found himself unable to say the word yes. Humanity's refusal spread fear among the empires, but also something else: unease. For centuries, the galaxy had whispered of Earth as a death world, a place of storms and predators, a world so hostile that its children grew fierce just to survive. To many, humans were a rumor of danger, a shadow in the background of history. Few had ever dealt with them directly. Now, the galaxy was watching as this very world, feared and underestimated, defied all warnings and stood against the will of the stars. If the humans keep the Veari, the Iral councils warned, they defy the balance of the galaxy. And if they defy us now, the Keth Dominion replied darkly, what else will they dare? Among the Veari, emotions were divided. Some felt gratitude so deep it burned in their hearts. They spoke of Earth as a miracle, a final answer to endless prayers. Others were afraid, haunted by the thought that the galaxy's anger would fall upon them all. Elder Siral, who had once spoken only of sorrow, now found himself standing between both voices. In the quiet of night, he walked with human leaders along the edge of the refugee camps. He asked them, "Do you truly understand the danger? Entire empires stand against us. They will punish you for taking us in." One human commander, a woman named Captain Reyes, looked at him with steady eyes. "We understand," she said, "but we are not afraid. Earth was never given anything. We fought for every breath on our world. Do you think we would abandon you because of threats?" Cyril's throat tightened. For a long time he could not speak. He had never met anyone who answered rejection with such certainty.